Fantastic. Okay, so hello and welcome to another MyArtBroker live panel event. A really exciting topic, the Banksy market. Now, we always have an amazing panel on these shows, but we are quite fortunate today to be joined by Joe Syer, our founder and head of Urban and Contemporary. And I've worked with Joey for coming on maybe 7 years now, and I have to say I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that there isn't anything that Joey doesn't know about the Banksy market. So Joey, thank you so much for being here. And equally, we have Florence Whittaker, our sales director, who you will speak to if you're looking to buy a Banksy, and our acquisition specialists, Helena Poole. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So where do we start when it comes to the Banksy market? I should say just before we start that there will be opportunity to ask questions down below, but we have had so many questions before the show that we're going to be absolutely up to the hour. But please do add them in the comments section. There's a little tiny, for those that don't know about Around, there's a tiny little speech bubble in the center, the bottom of your screen, where you can type questions as we go. So where should we start? Should we start at the very beginning, Joey? Should we start on a Bristol market stall in 2002 and take us from there?
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, as you mentioned, 2002, that's when Banksy started releasing limited edition prints and really sort of selling artworks. Rude Copper, which was the first edition that he released and sold back in 2002, was actually sold at the back of Steve Lazaridis's van. And they saw prints, I suppose, as a way of getting art out to the masses. From 2003, so a year later, Banksy started producing works with pictures on walls, and they really increased the amount of releases that he was doing every year. These releases, they didn't sell out immediately. Girl with Balloon Signed prints sat on the POW website unsold for over a year. Like I say, the people at POW and Banksy and Steve Lazaridis, they just use these prints to get the artwork out to as many people as possible. It was all very haphazardous back in the day. The artworks weren't sold. He didn't sign 150; they were sold immediately. They were sold out over quite a long period. 2006, 2007 is when we really started to see some big auction results. Banksy Original started regularly trading for over 50, 100,000, and on the back of that, I think prints started selling out a lot quicker from source. People were buying prints on the POW website, and they were flipping them the same day on places like eBay for 10 times cost. This did unfortunately lead to fraudsters basically selling fakes on eBay. And in 2008, that's when Pest Control was formed to try and put some sort of mechanisms in place where people weren't getting burnt, really. From there, Banksy released a number of prints with the POW up until around 2010. And again, his last print release to the public was in 2010, which was Choose Your Weapon. Where there was a bit of argy-bargy in the queue, and 58 people unfortunately missed out on prints, which I think led to him just realizing that maybe he's had enough of releasing prints, and he wanted to go in a slightly different direction, if you will. So he did some public exhibitions. In 2013 he did Better Out Than In, which was in America, which was a 23-day residency in New York, where he did a different piece each day. And 2015 saw him, do Disneyland over in Weston-super-Mare, which was a huge success. And again, it was a different way of him getting his artwork and other artists out to, a wider appeal. 2018 saw the shredding, which, I really think cemented his place in art history. Everyone has a story about the shredding. And then, probably over the last 5 years, we've really seen the market, mature into, an established secondary art market. Throughout that time, we've seen demand, massively increase. And, it's been a really interesting market to be involved in. And I'm sure that, there's lots of fun stories that we can talk about.
Well done for encapsulating that into a couple of minutes. So a lot of questions we've had already are based around the same things. So I'm going to kick off with what makes one Banksy more expensive than the other, which I think I will pass to Florence.
Sure, makes sense, I guess. Yeah, very happy to chat through this. Obviously, it's a question that I get quite a lot from the kind of sales side of things. I think that people often ask, what makes them more expensive than another, but I think there's also a couple of deeper questions within that, which are kind of the nature of Banksy works. So, as I'm sure many people will be aware, maybe a few won't, there are within the Banksy market, many of his prints were signed or unsigned, which obviously will have a great effect on the price. I know something that probably Helena will mention later, which is condition and provenance will also make a big difference to the price as well of something, and potentially more expensive or less. Edition size is obviously another one. And I think that's also something that you can see across the signed and unsigned. And I guess the final thing probably would be rarity or scarcity, might be a better word for it, which is sort of slightly different, which is I guess not necessarily the smallest edition number, although obviously that plays a part. But I guess works that rarely come up for sale. Often it is a simple case of supply and demand, so that will definitely affect the pricing of the works as well.
Helena, do you have anything? So Helena, who sees an awful lot of Banksy's through on her desk every day, do you have anything to add in terms? We've talked about edition size, we've talked about provenance. What sort of provenance can change the value of a Banksy?
I mean, obviously there are the kind of the big, major kind of superstar collections when you see kind of Robbie Williams or kind of Elton John selling their works, and particularly those themes around the works which they're selling, the original works, then maybe that will have a knock-on effect to some of the prints and multiple prices there. In terms of provenance, you really want to be careful about, obviously you might be the original owner, but you really need to ensure that you've got that pest control certificate there for the piece. I mean, they're the only, authenticating body for works by Banksy.
So Helena, before you move on, because there'll be people who understand pest control, and then there'll be people that think we're talking about actual pest control. So let's just take it back. Tell us who pest control are and why they exist.
So pest control, yeah, as Joe was saying, was set up in kind of 2008 when when Banksy began to see people creating kind of copies or fakes, and they were entering the market. And it's just the means by which people can really kind of establish that their work is an authentic work, by Banksy. I mean, they only, Pest Control only authenticate, works Banksy actually made to sell on the primary and now secondary market. So for works, which may have been like taken from the street, or for instance, you might not be able to necessarily get a Pest Control certificate for those pieces. They will provide, you'll submit the application, they'll provide a certificate, and that certificate will have kind of a, half of a die-face tenor on the work, and they'll retain the other half there to, have within their archives, should that kind of certificate then, later down the line kind of need to be kind of confirmed or come into question. They're kind of half of the value of a Banksy work in a way. The value of the Banksy piece is very much kind of the combination of the work itself and that pest control certificate. And in order to actually provide kind of a sale valuation for the piece and to, sell a piece on the market, we kind of really have to have that kind of confirmation of authenticity and kind of that stamp of approval from pest control.
Yeah. I mean, so much so when we ship a work, we often ship in fact, we always ship the artwork and the pest control certificate separately. You never want them sort of traveling together for exactly the reason that Helena said, that they're just sort of, they're so intrinsically linked, and it's so important that you've got that COA.
And how long can it take to get a COA?
Yeah. I mean, I think there has been a real kind of spike, I'm sure, in applications for them. So they do seem to have quite a backlog. I mean, Joey, I know you've had some people who've waited for a number of kind of years even for these certificates.
Yeah, we've had people that are waiting years. You've got to remember, like you say, they've had such a huge backlog. They also weren't really producing certificates over the COVID periods. So there was like a 2-year backlog there as well, which, coupled with the fact they're getting 500, 600, 700 applications every month, not always for legitimate works, it really has caused, a huge waiting time, for private clients to get their works authenticated.
And what's the risk of going to market? Obviously, with us, you can't go to market without a pest control certificate. But what is the risk of taking a print to market without it?
We just won't be able to realise the full value of it. Anyone that's going to buy, well, like you say, firstly, we just wouldn't broker anything without a certificate, just because we can't stand over it. But for any potential buyer out there, if they're going to risk buying a work without a certificate, they're going to want some sort of discount, I assume, to sort of have that in place. We've never worked with anything that doesn't have a certificate, and we never will.
You talked about how pest control, the sort of the queue of pest control really hit a high during COVID, at the same time as the market was booming, right? So everybody looked at the opportunity. Should we go to there then? Let's go to sort of 2020 and what happened in the market there. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I'll happily take it. 2020 saw the Banksy market pretty much triple in value, I'd say, between March and December. Entry level, unsigned prints that were trading at 10,000 maybe in March, they went up to 30,000, and likewise the rest of the market tripled and some, over that period as well. What we saw was a culmination really of a huge spike in demand. Like I say, that there wasn't much supply either. Pest Control weren't at the time issuing certificates. Banksy actually changed the design of the certificates around this time, so they weren't issuing any certificates, which meant that the supply was pretty much dried up, but demand was huge. So anything that was coming to market at auction or through galleries, dealers, brokers was being snapped up at these huge prices, just because demand far outstripped supply at the time.
So we've got a good question from somebody before the panel. I'm a Banksy owner, but have had some valuations by Bonhams 2 years ago and again earlier this year. I've been told the market has dropped quite a lot. I just want to maximise my sales potential and ask if there is any evidence to support if it's always best to sell when Banksy pulls off a headline grabbing stunt. Is there any research in that? And obviously COVID had a big impact in a positive direction, but I wondered if this was still a factor. Stunts and Banksy's market.
Yeah, no, I'll take this one again. I would definitely say that pre-COVID, there was a huge correlation between, Banksy getting out there and doing stunts and hitting up walls and doing street art. There was a huge spike in demand and prices on the back of that. We look at, like I mentioned, 2013, Better Out Than In, 2015, Dismaland, 2018, Shredding, all on the back of these huge, not just stunts, but just him being out and active again. It just gave fresh impetus into the market. You had resale investors, you had everyday collectors just seeing Banksy in a whole different light, and it definitely did have there was definitely a correlation between him doing a stunt and prices increasing. However, I would say that since COVID, I'm not sure that is the case. For one reason or another, he's he did his street works in Ukraine that didn't really affect the market too much. Again, he had his exhibition cut and run up in Glasgow, which didn't massively affect the market. But I do think that we're living in a completely different time now with the economic climate and the geopolitical climate that we're in at the moment. It would be a huge accomplishment for anyone to really sort of spike a market like he used to be able to, just by doing an event or doing something like that. So I think it's just we're in a different world now post-COVID. As simple as that.
What do you think the recipe for the market being so high during COVID was? What was the combination of factors that brought that on? Obviously, in 2018 we had the shred.
Yeah.
Then we had what I would call perhaps quite a stable growth from then, and then there was this boom. What were the factors?
I mean, I'm happy to take this one if I think that's right. If we chart it from sort of 2018 when the piece was first sold, which obviously shredded in the Sotheby's auction room, we see a kind of a direct correlation between the prices from then, exactly as Joe said, you know, when those sort of that stunt and those prices sort of built from the original market down to the prints and multiples. I think if we're looking at that sort of 3 years later, that the same artwork that sold for £1 million when it was shredded, then resold at 18.5 million. So, you know, we've seen a crazy sort of leap go there. And in that time, we've obviously had the COVID lockdown. And I think if we're looking specifically at those factors that affected the pricing, I think we are looking at the fact that obviously people were spending a lot more time at home. So they sort of looked at their walls, they saw a lot more white spaces. They sort of thought, oh, that, you know, maybe now's the time to sort of have a look at filling that space from a kind of aesthetic perspective. I also think a lot of people had, you know, more disposable income. They weren't going on those holidays that were cancelled because obviously all the flights are on standstill. You know, people did have a lot kind of more, you know, funds to have a look at potentially diversifying sort of assets at the time. And I think a lot of people looked to the Banksy market and saw the availability of these works. And obviously, then we saw, you know, again, that exactly as Joe said, that huge surge in the increase of in demand. And obviously, when you've got that, you know, prices tend to, you know, skyrocket, and that's kind of what we saw in those 2 years.
Yeah, I think just going on from your point about disposable incomes, you've got to remember as well at the time that, you know, the stock markets were massively down. People had pulled lots of money out of stock markets. There were bounce back loans for people in businesses in the UK. There was lots of cheap money around, basically. And, you know, the Banksy, I don't like to call it the hype train, but there was definitely a lot of hype around it at the time, which, you know, people were jumping in on. So, you know, what we saw around that time is there was massive, you know, demand in Asia. 75% of what we did around that time was going out to Asia alone. You know, since then there's been different trends, but it was just, yeah, there was a lot of people with disposable income looking to invest in something, and, you know, Banksy ticked a lot of boxes.
Tick boxes because, you know, because the rest of the art market did not flourish during that period. But tick boxes because you could deal them as long as they had a pest control. You didn't have to see them in person. What other boxes did it tick that made?
Well, you could also see them in person. Like Florence mentioned, like people sitting around looking at the art on their walls or blank walls and thinking, right, if I'm going to be sat here in lockdown, at least let me look at, you know, a picture. And you know, lots of Banksy were sold during that time, hung on the wall, moved. It was yeah, it was just a sign of the times, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. A very interesting question that's come in just live is the Pest Control Office and lack of issuing certificates affecting the market? E.g., is Banksy effectively controlling or limiting the secondary market?
No, I don't think so at all, personally. We're getting certificates through quicker than ever. Yeah, we've got a very good relationship with Pest Control, but I don't think that they're blocking certificates. Definitely not. No.
I think it's a good comparison to what happened at auction, isn't it, during the boom, and what, you know, as soon as the boom happened and a lot of people went to market. Let's talk about what happened at auction, which maybe then led to subsequent years.
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, the auction houses flooded the market, didn't they? You know, the volume of pieces that they put through was crazy. I think if you compare some quarters from 2020 to 2021, I mean, it's almost quadruple the number that was sold the previous year. And I think, you know, I'm sure Joe can probably chat more about it. You probably were in the room for quite a few of them, but there were, you know, a huge number of Banksy only sales, which is something we've never seen for you know, other artists. Of course, you had the headline sales, but we're talking, you know, with much greater regularity than any other artist I think seen before.
Yeah, these were monthly by, you know, far too many at the time. You know, I do think that model has probably run its course. I think the auction houses, so in the lower tier ones, I think they've realised that it just doesn't work anymore. But you know, the thing with the auction cycle, if you will, is you've got to remember that only one unsigned girl with balloon could be sold in that auction. So you know, you've got people queuing up basically for 3 or 4 more auctions. The calendar just gets filled up very quickly. So yeah, that sort of that's part of what happened with the auctions. But yeah, I mean, Florence, you're spot on with the volume, just the amount of sales that was just flooded.
The volume, and then of course, you know, works being consigned but not selling for 18 months later. And I'm sure we've got some auction people in our audience, so sorry to criticize it, but you know, what we saw is a lot of Banksy prints being consigned and then their values having to be changed by the time they went to auction, because there was such a queue. And as Joey says, you can't sell the same at the same time. Right, so jumping to current day, what would you buy right now, Florence? What would you buy in the Banksy market right this moment?
In terms of, yeah, sorry.
We're gonna have an unlimited budget to start with.
Okay, I would love that. Love that. Okay, so what would I buy? I mean, I guess I'd probably buy something that's also super, super in demand if you're going to kind of have a look at it from that perspective. You know, and actually it's kind of interesting going back to what you were saying about the volume and the auction you know, market. They're actually, despite there being a huge number of pieces that did go through, there are still some pieces that haven't actually come to public sale for like a number of years, if not ever. So if I had an unlimited budget, you know, sky's the limit, I'd probably go for you know, something like, I guess there's two sort of things here. You know, you could either go for the fantastic Girl with Balloon, you know, if we're looking at sort of iconic pieces, Girl with Balloon, Lovers in the Air, you know, the hero pieces that will forever be, you know, the nation's kind of favorite artworks, or always the pieces that are the most in demand and truly iconic and recognizable as Banksy. Or if you're going for something maybe a little bit more kind of you know, a little bit more quirky, a little bit more interesting, perhaps I'd go for something like a Dumbo. You know, it's a print that was never released to the public. Another one maybe being Love Hurts. Again, these are super, super rare, super sort of small, you know, low edition numbered pieces. Again, never been to auction, never released to the public, you know, have hardly even been seen come up at any kind of gallery or sort of private sale. So yeah, if the sky's the limit, that's probably what I would.
You'd go super rare. I suppose, you know, we'd all go super rare, wouldn't we? In terms of how the market has stabilized and matured, which particular series or particular factors do you look for in a Banksy investment?
Yeah, I think, you know, always when you're looking in terms of an investment, rather than a sort of a, you know, just a pure kind of passion piece, I guess you're looking at something that maybe you're thinking in the future that you might want to sell. So if you are looking at that, I mean, maybe this is something that Helena can probably touch on maybe a bit more, but, you know, you'd be looking at, again, sort of similar things, maybe the rarer works, but also making sure, obviously, they've got their pest control, making sure that the condition is good. You know, has the client kept, or the previous owner kept that piece in really good condition? Because, you know, condition can only really get worse. It's really hard to make that better. So when you're looking at something to buy, you know, again, I'm sure Helena can probably talk about this a bit more than I can, because she sort of does that on a sort of day-to-day evaluation basis. But yeah, that's definitely the sort of key things that I'd be looking at.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, if I'm investing in a piece, condition would just be so key. And I think, you know, it's also so important when you're, you know, if you've got a Banksy, that you understand actually what you've got, what the condition is, and, you know, how you can improve it. I mean, we always recommend kind of getting a condition report, you know, for a piece on a relatively regular basis, because you never know kind of how the changes in storage and light and temperature that you just have naturally kind of fluctuating in your house may kind of affect the work. And so, yeah, I think just understanding the condition, knowing kind of early on, if you're coming to sell or coming to buy, what, if anything, can be improved upon. And then just if you've got a piece yourself, just making sure you've got, you know, if you're storing it framed and it's on the wall, that it's behind, you know, museum quality glass. You've got an acid-free paper. You know, you've got the proper like archival standard, like really non-invasive framing methods that can be removed, and that you don't, you know, store it in kind of humid and light conditions, because, you know, light direct sunlight, if the fading of the work, that can't really actually be changed that much later on. You can remove other kind of, dirt, dust, other kind of objects, but actually kind of, the paper staining is very kind of hard to improve upon, greatly. So I think just really kind of trying to keep it in as a secure and stable environment as possible, and also understanding that when you're buying the piece, how was this work stored previously, what's been done to it before, is just really key.
And I mean, condition in the Banksy market is quite a mix, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's in every market, not just Banksy market. I mean, you look at Warhol, Herring, Liechtenstein. Like, yes, Banksy's slightly different because these are slightly newer, but these were the majority of these prints were between 50 and 150 pounds at release, and no one thought they'd be worth anywhere near this. Students used to buy these and sellotape them to the walls. And yes, condition plays a factor, but at the same time, out of the 250 rude coppers that were released, the majority of them are probably in poor to fair condition. So it's there will be always a bit of a premium, but you've got to remember that a lot of the edition will have condition issues. So it's not necessarily the be all and end all. But again, sorry.
No, what can be done about that, Joey? If something, because there are lots of people that, exactly as you said, people bought them not knowing what they were, put them up with blue tack on their dorm walls. Like, what can be done?
So a reputable conservation specialist can work wonders with prints. They really can. Whether it's washing them, if they've got if they've got acidity from mounts or anything like that. If they've got blue tack, they can have that removed. Ultimately, a conservation specialist would look to try and stabilize the condition of the work. As Florence mentioned, it's very rare that they can improve the condition dramatically, but they would look to stabilize it so that the condition of the work wouldn't get worse over time. But again, that will then come down to how you store it. And if you are going to frame it, making sure you're going to a reputable framer that's going to use fully archival conservation materials. Again, we conservation specialists will be able to recommend framers, and again, it's something that we can recommend. All of our clients and prospective clients, we can definitely help them out with conservation specialists, and framers.
Yeah, I think it's also quite a good point to note, which is obviously with my unlimited budget. Sorry, I was being able to buy anything I wanted, but I think the idea that these works are in generally sometimes mixed condition can also bring the price down. So often it does mean that there may be opportunities for you to acquire the piece that you are looking for, but maybe at a slightly lesser price point if you can be a little bit flexible about the condition. There's definitely there's definitely a compromise to be had, and we're not talking completely terrible, but there's definitely routes and options to pieces that you're looking to purchase, whether that be signed or unsigned, within that kind of budget. Exactly, if you're able to kind of compromise on that condition.
Yeah, I mean the price difference can be huge. It could be up to like 50% for something that's in poor condition to something that's in excellent condition. So always do your research. I mean, we only deal every artwork that we broker, we have unframed and a full condition report carried out standard, just because we need to make sure that we can stand over it, and we want to make sure that anyone that we're working with knows the true condition of the artwork. So that's something that we do as standard here.
There's someone actually who's just asked, where can she get a condition report from? And that would be something that we could advise you directly on. So do email us afterwards about that. Whilst we're talking about things that affect value, is it a good time to go into signed versus unsigned, Florence?
Absolutely. So I think we sort of mentioned previously with regards to the results. I think the unsigned market, as the signed market did during the pandemic, sort of increased a crazy amount. It was overinflated. It has obviously come down a little, but generally, you can tend to get an unsigned work at a much lower level than the signed piece. It makes for a fantastic entry-level Banksy for those who don't particularly have, a huge budget, but you can still get a seminal work. for an amazing price. And you know, it's still hand numbered by the artist. It's still hand pulled. You know, you've got a lovely feel to that.
Limited edition.
And it's obviously a limited edition.
I think the beauty with the Banksy market is because you have the Pest Control certificate. It's part of an edition. Yeah, 150 were signed, 600 were unsigned, but those 600, they're still part of that edition. You've still got provenance from Pest Control. And you know, a lot of our Asian clients during COVID were buying more unsigned than signed, just because that's, you know, that's the way that they saw it. Was it's still an authentic Banksy. It's just not been hand signed, but it's been hand numbered. It's part of that same limited edition, but it's just a fraction of the price. So yeah, it's a funny one, signed v unsigned. But you know, I suppose, I hate to sound like an art dealer, but you know, your budget will always drive you to the budget will always advise, basically. You know, if you can afford signed, then go for signed. But you know, unsigned are no, that they're not to be looked down at, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you look at the way that he actually numbered the pieces, you know, at the very beginning. So those early works, you know, Lovers in the Air and Monkey Queen, they're actually out of 750. So the 600 unsigned and the 150 signed, you know, it was always intended for them, exactly as Joe said, to be in that same edition, but just that some were signed and some were unsigned. So, you know, it's quite interesting that that's the kind of thought mentality behind Banksy's sort of process at the time.
Yep. And again, it was just a way of getting the art out to as many people as possible, you know, which was the original goal.
Helena, in terms of how you're valuing works at the moment and the unsigned market, there's quite a few questions we've had around. Well, you know, there are. Will the Banksy market ever go to the heights it has before? And you know, was that a bubble? How stable does the market look right now? We can all talk about that in different ways. But Helena, how much has that stabilization happened in the signed versus unsigned market?
I mean, I think we've got kind of it's probably pretty par. I mean, I think both have obviously come down since that kind of 2021 peak, but we very much kind of are seeing kind of a stabilization currently. You know, we're seeing a real demand for those works. You know, when we're pricing works, actually the comparative kind of hammer prices of the signed and unsigned work that relative to where they were in 2021 are pretty consistent, and largely on most of the works, you know, especially for the signed and also for most of the unsigned, we're above where we were at those 2019 levels. And so actually, although kind of we have that kind of particular peak in 2021, actually, if you kind of take out some of those really high points, there's still been a very nice kind of upward trajectory and kind of stable, you know, stable market that we're seeing now amongst kind of clients and collectors, both kind of looking to sell and buy these pieces. I think it's a very good time, you know, to do both, depending on kind of what your kind of investment aims are.
I think with the vendors, it's always, or it always has been and always will be, just about their personal position. You know, they might need, it's all about when they need to sell. We would, you know, the way that we've always dealt in the last 15 years with all vendors is to say, look, you know, you need to sell it when you're ready to, and when you need to. You know, you can't be pushed into that. And the market could go up in 6 months, it could go down, it could trade sideways, it could, you know, do the loop, who knows? But, you know, ultimately with any vendors, it's all about personal timing, and, you know, have they got something they need to move those funds into, or, you know, they're getting married, they need an extension, who knows? But, you know, there will always be a right time for someone to sell, not just a Banksy, but any artwork or luxury asset. It really just comes down to what's going on in their lives, I suppose.
Question here from somebody who has collected Banksy and wonders whether it is wiser to wait before investing further. Wait for a couple of years.
So again, we don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. I wouldn't be in South London at the moment. But yeah, look, what we're seeing at the moment is, you know, the market's definitely stabilized. Now, where it's going to go, like I say, nobody can tell that. You just can't call that. Is it a good time to buy? Yes, you know, it's the lowest it's been for a few years now. There are some fantastic buying opportunities. Will they be around in 2 years' time? Who knows? but we're certainly seeing, a huge increase in demand, private sales, and just a general appetite for Banksy artwork again, which I personally believe will definitely push the market on this year.
Yeah, and we have seen some really strong results kind of at Phillips this January. It'll be interesting to see how these upcoming, sales in this kind of spring do kind of at the auction houses. And I really feel like there is a kind of a lot of traction and momentum that we're seeing amongst, people looking to, invest in the market. And I think that's a really kind of positive sign that there's still a great deal of strength and kind of longevity there.
I think that was also correlates across, I think we saw some particularly strong sort of unsigned sales in December. We've seen some really good sell-through rates as well. I think that's another thing that we sort of forget to mention. Obviously, of course, price is really important, but often with those on that kind of downward trajectory, it was the fact that hardly any works were selling. Whereas I think we saw an auction recently, it was about a 98% sell-through rate. I mean, that's just astonishing that that's back. So that is really, really, really positive, and that's for signed and unsigned. And then exactly as Helena said, we've got some exciting auctions coming up for original works. Obviously, there was the Elton John sale recently, which I think that was of course it was a Lovers in the Air, the thrower, iconic work, but raised sort of 2 million USD. So there is, I know obviously that is a sort of celebrity sale, but we're seeing some great confidence, and I think that's it's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the key there, is the confidence in the market. And it does look like the confidence is definitely back. But again, it really depends. As much as auction isn't the only barometer to how the market's performing, it does depend on what happens in the spring auctions over the next sort of 6 weeks. So yeah, it's very much wait and see, I think.
Yeah, I think also just going back to what the point that you were saying, Joe, which is that I think out of the sales that you see in the art world, of the sort of data that you have, at your fingertips, only sort of 30, and it's only really 30%, I think, that goes through auction, and a lot of that is private. So if you think about all the works that are trading privately that people don't see, works that haven't been to auction, have never been to auction, there's still huge demand for those pieces. I think a couple of the works that I know that we're that we constantly have requests for, things like the pink flying copper, these works that have never been to public auction. Turf War, this is another one that has only sold a couple of times since it was created in 2003. There are these works that are never going to be at auction, so you'll never see sort of what that looks like, but potentially some great confidence and huge demand, but only in really the private circles. So again, there's a much bigger picture, I think, for us to kind of look at here.
I think sorry, Joey, go on.
There you go, Charlotte.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's one of the reasons why it's quite important just to look outside of auctions, isn't it, and talk to.
Yeah. But I mean, just to sort of go on from what you were saying, Florence, about things like Turf War that was supposedly 150 signed. I can guarantee, I bet my mortgage on the fact there's not 150 in circulation. I think we have 5 in our network, and speaking with other dealers and collectors, they've sold 1 or 2 in the past. Like, they're just not. Some of these editions just were never completed. And then that coupled with especially the earlier editions that were destroyed or lost or left in university halls when you're moving between terms. Like, there's the actual supply is definitely nowhere near the full edition number, I'd say.
A couple of questions about people who did invest at the peak. Should they wait? Should they wait and to be able to have the same return or bigger return, or should they sell now?
Again, it depends on your personal circumstances. If you need to realize that money, then sell. However, if you did buy at peak, which a lot of us did, I bought at peak as well. It was done throughout the market. And you can afford to sit it out and wait for the market to pick back up, then that would be my advice.
And I suppose also just talk to us about what it is that you're looking to sell, because I think the great thing about what we do is the ability to understand what the demand is in the market right now, outside of that 30% and within our collector network. So if in doubt, speak to a specialist. Florence, in terms of trends of what people are looking to invest in at the moment, are there any particular series? Are there any particular colorways that you've noticed at the moment seem to be really piquing people's interest?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one, because actually, Banksy hasn't done a huge number of works, really, and hasn't released a number of works sort of recently. So it's not, and his works sort of resonate with different people. So I don't think there's a kind of a specific trend that I would say right now, gosh, you must buy this because, X, Y, Z. I would always, without sounding, I guess, too twee about it, I would always buy an artwork that you sort of resonate with, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to hang it on your wall. You can love it. If you love it, someone else is going to love it as much as you do one day. So I would always go with your gut with regards to kind of what you're looking to buy. Of course, there are obviously opportunities within the market, and with sort of specific pieces that might come up. Again, it's something we've touched on previously. If it's a super rare work, maybe that might be something of interest. But yeah, in terms of trends, I mean, I'm definitely seeing a kind of greater confidence again in people coming to us looking for specifically signed works as well. I think, perhaps that, they saw the prices at the peak and they have come down. People feel like they're kind of able to sort of maybe come back to those. But then again, as I said, we've had some great bounce back in the unsigned market as well recently, as sort of December. So I mean, you can never go wrong with your sort of iconic Banksy works. So if you're looking for trends, sometimes the signed or unsigned girl with balloons, they're always in demand. Just super recognizable work. So again, if you are looking to buy, please do obviously get in touch. We can definitely have a discussion around the kind of works that you like, the kind of budget that you might be playing with.
Sorry to cut in, Florence. Where would you say, like, if we're talking about trends, like location trends at the moment, where are we seeing a lot of, where are you selling, where are a lot of your clients based at the moment, where are you shipping to at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. There was definitely a big draw to kind of the Asian clients during the pandemic. That's slightly softened now, and we're definitely seeing a greater sort of demand from the US actually. So a lot of on the East Coast and West Coast really. So yeah, a lot of collectors from the US coming in, which is obviously a massive collector market, which is also really exciting. I think Banksy, obviously we're sort of proud to have him as a sort of British artist, but I think they're really starting to kind of appreciate his works over there. And again, maybe if we are talking about trends and the US, they're going to go for the slightly more universally liked works, maybe the slightly less kind of specific British pieces, and maybe the more sort of universal works that Banksy does do on sort of anti-war, anti-establishment, the kind of general messages that sort of, I think, are, as I said, universal to all.
Helena, I know you touched on this earlier, but let's talk about preparing if you're looking to sell, how can you prepare your work ready to take to market? What are the things you need to do?
I mean, yeah, first off, obviously making sure that you've got that pest control certificate. And then, once you've got all of that, I think, thinking about kind of the best platform in which to sell the work. Obviously, come to us and we're more than happy to kind of discuss the market with you, provide kind of a sale valuation. What I'm looking for there, if I'm, sent across, just a request for a sale valuation is like, images of the work, ideally unframed, but framed is fine if that's what you've got. I don't want people to start unframing their works and kind of risk, damaging them in any way when kind of opening up work on paper. So just taking some images, really clear ones in, decent light, hopefully without too much reflection of the work, any condition issues that you might be aware of. If you know that there's, maybe, it was kind of rolled before and there might be a bit of an undulation there, just so that we can have an open conversation about what might come up later down the line when we've got that condition report, that professional condition report kind of issued. And you know, also kind of images of the, you know, any signature, any inscription, you know, any, maybe if it's a rarer piece, any hand painted or kind of hand drawn elements, whatever those might be, just so that we've got kind of a full picture of the work, so that we can really kind of understand and place it within the current market. Because I think all of those different things, you know, each work has got kind of a different story behind it and kind of different provenance. And so that all factors into evaluation. And then, yeah, I'll kind of provide evaluation. I'll be kind of looking kind of quite on the short term based on, you know, obviously really recent discussions that we've been having privately about work. As we said, you know, obviously, you know, the auction, you know, auction and hammer prices represent only like 33% of the market. So, you know, we'll be looking at those hammer prices, but also kind of trying to give you a sense, you know, of a wider picture and what other conversations, where are other works, you know, being offered, what they're selling for. Are they actually selling at these, you know, inflated prices? Because often they can be sitting there for 6-12 months and not be selling. And you know, just having kind of those open conversations. But yeah, if you want evaluation, yeah, condition, the images and the pest control certificate are what you just need, just images of them first and foremost, via WhatsApp, via email, kind of in simple form, and then we can kind of go from there in terms of a kind of a conversation about the wider market.
Really interesting point about, you know, because there has been so much activity over the last few years and work sitting on various platforms with prices on them that haven't moved, you know, since maybe 2 years ago, you know, and that goes back to your unsold rate point, Florence. The originals market, just briefly. What does that look like in terms of where we were a couple of years ago? And are we seeing more demand in the originals market? Obviously, at MyArtBroker, whilst we focus on prints, we do also handle originals in the Banksy market. What trends are you seeing there? Are you seeing a pickup in demand?
So I'll say it's a very similar trend to the print market. You know, it definitely it's definitely come off a bit. You know, it's corrected. But you know, since the correction, I'll say that yeah, there's definitely some more demand for original works. As Florence mentioned, we've seen some strong sales already this year, and I'm sure that you know, coming into the spring auctions, there'll be a few more strong sales.
Somebody's asked a question about Sotheby's lowering their sellers' premium. I will direct you to an article that we wrote on that after this. Do we think that it will affect how much Banksy comes onto the market?
What, Sotheby's lowering their commissions?
Yeah, no.
Helena, I'll let you take that one.
I mean, I think that you've got an auction, you've got set auctions, and I think the strategy from, you know, someone who's been at an auction house for 6 years, up until the end of last year, you know, you know, obviously there were the Banksy only sales, but I think always is key is to spread things out amongst the market. And I don't think anyone's really looking to flood the market in any way. And you'd only want to have 1 or 2 kind of works by Banksy per sale, because also, you know, if you're consigning something to auction, you want it to, you know, achieve a decent result. And if you're putting so many works on the market, what we've seen exactly is the buyer base is just being split, and so you're never going to actually be able to get a kind of a really good result there. I'm sure that, you know, lots of people, you know, want to sell their works, and it's just, you know, you have to kind of break them down kind of sale by sale in order to kind of, I guess, place them on the market and provide a longer term strategy with how to put these different things in the market over, you know, a year, 18-month period, whatever it might be.
I'm very conscious of time, but I've had a lovely question come in. Of all the sort of separate, perhaps from such sort of hard market commentary, but of all the mavericks of street art that emerged in the 90s and 2000s, why do you think that Banksy has catapulted to such market success? What's special about him and his market? Go on, Florence.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question, isn't it? I saw that one pop up, and he is. I think you probably hit the nail on the head there. The person that asked that question with the second word of that question, which is maverick, and I think that's probably exactly what is the reason as to why, you know, we still talk about, he's still so relevant. He will forever, I think, be completely relevant. I think it's because he's so maverick. I also think he completely touched on the zeitgeist of the times. You know, he's culturally you know, has kind of hit many points. He's always been quite anti-establishment, but he's also reacted, I think, incredibly well with impactful pieces that are humorous or shocking or, you know, immediately kind of recognizable. I also think his anonymity obviously plays a huge part in that. His anonymity, I think, is one of the main reasons there's such an allure to sort of, which I know many other street artists are, but he's just done it with such great vigor, and actually he's made his anonymity sort of so public, which is, it feels kind of oxymoronic, but I think that's kind of why it's almost the opposite of staying in the shadows, but still no one really knows who he is. And I think that's also quite important, you know, in a world, I think, where everyone knows everything about everyone and everything. I think there's still a great sense of mystery to that. And I think at the end of the day, aesthetically, I mean, he's a fantastically talented artist, and I think that's carried it through.
There are rumours, just on that point of identity, which I'm actually surprised hasn't come up sooner in the comments here. There are rumours that his identity might be revealed soon. Could that impact his market? I presume. I mean, they put work, but I think the inference is market.
I think there's been rumours for the last 20 years, Charlotte. Daily Mail have been trying to out him for a good 18 years. I genuinely don't think it's going to affect the market one iota these days. 10, 15 years ago it might have, but I think he's come on such a long way. And not just in the work that he does, but, you know, in all of the charity, the amount of charity that Banksy and Pest Control contribute to behind the scenes is just incredible. And genuinely, I don't think that him being outed or someone being outed is going to affect the market whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, I think just going back to what the question was saying before, I think, you know, he's been on the right side of history, I think, for quite a lot of this. If you think about, exactly as Joe says, the charity works that he did during COVID, you know, the Superman, you know, the piece for the NHS, you know, the kind of the works in Ukraine, the refugee boat. I mean, you know, he's consistently been relevant, and yeah, I mean, some might sort of consider them stunts as well, but, you know, I think generally they're from a very good place, and I think he's always kind of you know, sort of standing up for the little guy, and I think we like that, don't we? You know, we've sort of
I think, yeah, there's such a depth to his fan base, and such a strong aesthetic as well, that I don't think a name would necessarily alter that. If not, people would just, you know, almost love him more being unmasked. But, you know, the narratives can be kind of, I don't know, I don't think it would really change anything, and I think people would probably quite love it in a way.
It's almost like we don't, you know, real fans don't need to know or want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't care. So the future of the Banksy market, for all your crystal balls, folks, where will we be in, you know, 18 months time, 2 years? Does anyone have any predictions?
Yeah, I think I think that the market is definitely going to, it's already stabilized, I think. So I think we are going to start to see some, you know, just steady growth, which is what all markets want. You know, no markets want these huge, you know, spikes and then corrections, you know, peaks and troughs. You want any, not just art markets, but any asset market, you want to see a nice steady, you know, 5, 10, 15% per annum growth, which, you know, that's how Banksy used to be. That's how it was in the past. And I genuinely believe that, you know, given the data that we're seeing and the amount of demand within our network that we're seeing and the new inquiries coming in, and, you know, the fact that it has become, you know, affordable again for, you know, people to buy and purchase prints and originals, I genuinely believe that we're going to see, you know, a nice, steady, healthy market once again.
Florence?
Yeah, I think if we're looking sort of, you know, further down the line, you know, I definitely, and I know this is obviously a very big call, but I do really see Banksy in terms of, you know, not only his way of working, but in terms of his reach globally, is a sort of, you know, 21st century Warhol. I think, you know, there is that cultural relevance. I think he's you know, he's hit that sort of demand, as I said, globally. I think if we're looking sort of 10 years down the line, you know, I think he's going to be, I mean, if not there already, he's
there already, Florence.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I think he's got a far smaller body of work than Warhol, and barring a few outliers, they're very similar. So yeah, if he's not there already, then yeah, I completely agree with you. He will be there at some point in the near or distant future.
Helena, any more predictions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's always, I'm sure that we will see kind of certain fluctuations on kind of the smaller scale, coming up in, in kind of the shorter term, perhaps. I think, it's very hard to predict. I think there is, though, so much positivity that we've seen kind of entering into this year, that I can only imagine, us continuing to kind of, stabilize and continue along at this level, at least for the short term. And then, longer term, it's kind of really hard to judge. But I think his, the significance of kind of all of his work is kind of undisputed, and there will always be a strong demand. And I think especially as works aren't perhaps entering the market at the moment, that will cause obviously kind of an uptick in prices just through scarcity. So yeah, I think it's got a lot of legs.
The kind of Warholian parallel is quite interesting, isn't it? Because of course, loads of those prints were produced and just like shoved in the back of cars, which is a whole other issue we have with older prints that we then have to find provenance for and look at the condition of. Do you imagine that the next generation of the Gen Zs, those below, I think it's 26, will they be buying deeply in Banksy in 50 years time, like Warhol, like the Warhol market is now for millennials and boomers?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I believe so too. I really do. I think there'll be strong cultural assets that they'll want to have within their portfolio. There's a collecting across a wide array of artists. I think we'll all want to have a Banksy within their collection.
And it's almost as if we hadn't seen this journey over the last few years, he wouldn't have that much gravitas, right? Because he wouldn't have been through that journey and gone to stabilization. And there's a story, a piece of heritage about the market that you're buying there too.
Yeah.
Brilliant, guys. Thank you so much. I think we are out of time. We've got more questions, but please do email us at info@MyArtBroker if there's anything more you'd like to ask and speak to this lovely panel of people about your considerations, whether you're buying or selling. Thanks, guys, so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Cheers. Bye.